how everybody is so enjoying this session about the teaching, training, and new innovative skills in the field of resident training.
So, not wasting much of time, let's take this discussion one step ahead. That to start with, since we are not having Santosh Honawar sir right now, so we'll start with our first speaker. Before we start the session, I would like to request all the speakers to strictly adhere to their allotted time because we are already running behind the schedule. So I would like to invite Dr. Swarna Bisaria, and the first topic for the debate is the camp postings for residents. To keep it or do we do away? So first, I would like to invite again Dr. Swarna Bisaria.
Good morning, everybody. Now, I have been asked to speak on very important topic, that is the posting of the residents in I camps. And I don't think there should be any debate on this, because all the residents want to attend camp postings, and we too want them to attend. We are preparing the future ophthalmologist. He should be skilled and competent. So we will have to start from the scratch, from the first year PG residency. What is the cause? Why this is so important? The problem is that every year we train only 900 ophthalmologists. And these ophthalmologists are also not very much skilled. And this is because of the lack of infrastructure. Now, we have private medical colleges, we have government medical colleges. In private medical colleges, equipments usually, sorry for the private one, we don't have very good quality equipments, so they are not exposed to it. In the government college, most of the equipments are spoiled and they are not working. So this is the thing, that material is also less. So it is better to do the camp postings and see the patients in mass, and then bring the patients there and see the selected patients. Now what we require about 25,000 specialists. So this is a very a large difference, that we are preparing 900 and we require 25,000. And what our PG should have, they should have a uniform standard. Practice-based learning means on the patient they should learn the things, while patients are very less in the colleges. Communication skill is again important, because they are so much busy in the other activities that they cannot have the good communication with the patients. Professionalism is also important, and system-based, that in which system they are working. They are working in the very small patients gathering, while in the camp they will be working in the mass. So the new need of the camp will be, it is highly desirable to accept the strategy of the higher services to the population in remote and underserved areas of the country. And then we will see for this comprehensive eye care, resident posting is required in the eye camps. They will not only diagnose the cataract, because all the PGs are taking cataract is a bread and butter, and just seeing the cataract, doing the cataract surgery. So there will be so many eye diseases, ocular morbidities will be there, and they will see a group of the diseases in the camps, and they will be exposed to the clinical ophthalmology. What are the advantages of camp posting? This provides safe, independent, skilled and competent experts, because they will be working independently but under some supervision of the senior consultants. This creates a listening skill, because so many patients are there, they will have to listen to them and they will have to answer them, because they are independent ophthalmologists. So their listening skill will be important. As somebody has told you, they should be a good listener. And if they will listen, they will be able to treat the patient properly, and they will have a good relationship with the patient and their relatives. Then effective leadership to carry the professional duties within ethical principles. Then they will see that the comprehensive eye care services to understand in the mass practice cost-effective health care, because usually in the camp it will not be, it should be economical. So they will learn how to work in the low economic status. And then after seeing this, their study or their work will be used for the epidemiological study or the research purposes. They will also learn the arrangement of the OT in the different places, and they will perform the extraocular and intraocular surgery under some supervision. Along with this, they will have the promotion of the eye donation. If a patient is having low vision, they will manage it, and then the management of all the ocular problems. Here they will develop the counseling also. Interdepartmental relationship, that is an interdisciplinary relationship with the different cadres of the workers, as the nurses, ward boys, doctors, seniors, and the patients and patients' relations. So they will develop the soft skill also. So just to say, just to conclude, that camp posting is necessary for providing excellent quality of standard eye care, because they are going to produce this in the future. Prevention of load of blindness will be decreased, and more surgical competent hands. At present, we are seeing that only 10% of ophthalmologists are having the surgical hands. 90% in the colleges are non-surgical. So if they will have the practice, because I was director of the RIO, and I have seen there were 60 ophthalmologists, only 10 were doing the surgery. That is the consultant. So it is really a must to just develop the confidence in the PGs by posting in the camps. And then definitely the effective communication required for informed consent and rehabilitation. So they will have to, if a patient is having some problem, the informed consent should be there, so that because of the medical legal point of view, there should not be responsibility on the doctor. And if a patient is blind, then rehabilitation can be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Swarna. And looking at the other side of the coin, that camp posting is not needed, or maybe doing it away, it's the other way of looking at it. Let's have Dr. Prakash Marathe with his talk.
Slides, please. Yeah, good morning. Respected chairpersons and the delegates and postgraduates who are present here, I must congratulate organizers of AIOC for organizing the wonderful conference, and nice word for ARC team, who has been doing the wonderful job throughout the year. I think such sort of debate is very much needed from postgraduates' point of view, and the topic which is allotted to me is about postgraduates not going to camps. But basically the thing, while doing the debate, some things I am going to discuss about it, whether exactly the topic is same, or some things I would like to discuss about it. Now, whenever the doctor is operating or he is checking the patient in his clinic or in his hospital or medical college, that is a different entity. The person who is working in the camp is different thing. Are we treating camp as guinea pig like thing? No. Again, the standard of care which is given in the medical college, in private clinic, in government hospital and in the camp must be same for all the patients, because it is their right. Now, when the unit heads and professors and full-time degree holders are there in the medical colleges, under their guidance, PGs are working. So whenever something is done by PG, who is responsible at the end? That is the head. Because under his supervision the PG is doing, and when in the camp, suppose the PG is working independently, that thing is lacking. So responsibility is a very important thing, and PGs if doing that thing independently, and if something goes wrong, maybe in surgery, maybe in diagnosis, I think that is not the good thing. So identity of that person, whether it is postgraduate or full-time or ophthalmologist who is perfectly trained, that matters a lot. So basically residents are the trainee doctors. Though they are MBBS doctors, they haven't completed their DO or MS or DNB. They are on the way of completion of their degree. So probably they are lacking in experience and foolproof training is not being done. That is the important thing one must remember here. So still treated as students and learners, of course we all know that, even if in the camps and otherwise society treats them as doctors, but most of the times they are students also. So surgeries independently are done by PGs in this camp, and if the treatment given by them is not sufficient enough, I think as medical fraternity, ophthalmologists, we are lacking in that sense. So final remarks and diagnosis, which must be done by PGs, but under supervision of unit heads and their teachers. So treatment they are giving, again, whole responsibility is on the professors and their teachers. Medical legal responsibility, this is very important. Whatever is done by the PG, unit head and professor is responsible for that. So independently PGs shouldn't handle all these things. They must do everything under the supervision of their medical head. Now the thing, coming to the last slide, this was the debate topic. What I mean to say, this was the topic discussed by me in relation to debate. But at the end, half a minute, I'm going to discuss about one thing, that even if the topic allotted to me that PGs shouldn't be sent to the camps, it is not 100% true. Basically, as my opponent has said, that PGs, they are not properly trained if it is private medical college, if there are sufficient number of patients are not there, probably training is insufficient. So they need the training, and camp is the basic thing where they should be exposed. But the thing happens nowadays, only PGs go there, nobody supervises, and treatment given is not in the better format. So they must be supervised properly. Suppose JR is working, CR must be there, their lecturer must be there, and at the end, unit head or professor, they must be in a position to take the responsibility of the treatment, of the surgery, of the diagnosis, what the PGs are doing in the camp. So basically, PGs posted in camps can be done, but ultimately responsibility should be with the unit head and professor. I think with all this, what I wanted, this is enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Actually, to my personal, I should say personal experience is that soft skill, the basic lays, camp posting lays the foundation of the soft skills. So it is helping to the residents to some extent, because since morning we have been discussing about the communication skill. So if the resident by camp posting gets a local dialect, the touch and the feel of that local dialect, definitely he's going to make the clinical scenario in a much easier way to start with.
Agreed. I think that's what I've said in the
Yeah.
last half a minute. Thank you so much.
I am not in government sector, but as I know, the field cataract surgical camps are stopped, I think all over in the India. I think so.
Yeah.
What you say?
Exactly the point I was making. We need to separate diagnostic and surgical camps. Diagnostic camps are still a big yes, like ma'am said. We require them for exposing our students to these skills and workup of patients, and especially in the lower economic strata. But surgical camps, like sir said, it's mostly been done away with, but the diagnostic camps, as of now, I think they are required, especially for residents, under supervision, like
That's true.
supervised.
Actually, the camps are always under the unit head. When a camp is organized, unit head is going, and with the unit head, the PGs are going. So they are always supervised.
So, madam, you are perfectly right. Sometimes my PGs are just sent that particular center,
no,
4 PGs are going.
in the
and
government
nobody is
sector,
taking
it
the
is not.
responsibility. It is that.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
So taking the discussion about the resident training program, I would be starting this session with this discussion on the ocular sonography. For the residents, my points would be that how are they supposed to do or they not. So why this skill training is important? That's because the ultimate goal of any PG residency program is to cultivate a comprehensive clinical care. That means what? That means we all know that the present residents are the future beholders to the society for the complete eye care to diagnose, treat, or even the timely referrals also. And as MCI lays the guidelines about the PG training program, it also emphasizes that there is a need to produce the competent specialist who enables them to carry out their duties in all the ethical way. Also, when we talk about the international forum, that's about the ICO, again it lays the guideline and emphasizes on training and understanding the skills to such an attitude and to such a level that the ophthalmic specialists who are under their training period, once they are into full-blown ophthalmologists, definitely they are self-dependent to handle all the clinical scenarios. And again, coming back to a country like ours, that's a developing country like ours, that's India, and one of the flag bearers of providing quality eye care. We do have an additional responsibility to train our residents so that they can contribute in the way they are expected to. Now coming to the particular skill which I am talking about here, that's ocular sonography. The role of the sonography is not only limited about scanning or doing the ocular biometry or taking care of the axial length. It is much beyond that. That is especially when we talk about the ocular tumors or the orbital pathology, especially the choroidal melanoma. We can say that starting from seeing the lesion size, planning the radiation treatment, and also when it comes to monitor the response to the treatment. It all requires every time the sonography for the patient. So even this is re-emphasized by a study done by Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, which said that in their particular group, 5.5% of eyes which were enucleated for melanoma had undergone cataract surgery. And they re-emphasized that if had it been that sonography would have been done before the surgery, probably the intervention would have been taken a different shape. So this emphasizes the need for performing sonography in all the patients who have a dense, unexplained unilateral cataract. And looking at the magnitude of problem, that's a doctor-patient ratio in India, which accounts for 50% of world's blind population. One ophthalmology, we have to cater for 90,000 population. That means a huge crowd is waiting in the waiting line. So again, looking at this doctor-patient ratio, it gives an additional responsibility to train our residents to all the skills at their very basic training period, so they are confident enough to handle the patient who is coming with a common complaint of defective vision also. So a timely referral and a correct referral can be done to the tertiary level care. That's because the net gain giving, that's we are causing a filtering at the primary level. So tertiary level, the patient crowd is less. So actually the patient who need the care at tertiary level, they are being taken care of. And again, coming back to the primary level, as we have been talking about the camp posting, the resident and the junior doctors are the first contact to the patients. And if they are able, because of this trained skills, definitely they can take the instant decision, saving a lot of time and agony for the patient also. So in all, to conclude, we can say that we all can help a step for the National Program for Control of Blindness by better skill acquisition, saving the time for referrals, and sharing the responsibility of the goals set by the NPCB. So again, coming back to the ocular sonography or the particular skill I'm talking about, that's A scan or B scan, though we know it's difficult to master. But as we say, that practice makes a man perfect, and a step taken by AOS, we can see the difference of the particular skill I'm talking about from the 20th century to the 21st century. And let's conclude this presentation from my side that yes, if the residents are being trained in a particular skill in a particular way, definitely it lays the career foundation while protecting the interest of the patient. Thank you. Now I would like to call upon Dr. Ankur Srivastava for the...
So thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful talk. I am Dr. Ankur from Raipur AIIMS. And in this era where we are talking about positivity, where we're talking about people to be more and more independent, I have been giving a talk by Chairman ARC about not to do something by the residents. What we are trying to emphasize from AGES is that to make our residents more and more proficient. But what I'm going to highlight just few points is that what not to be done. So when I started my PG program, we were initially afraid to touch the patient, and gradually our consultants, our professor, our heads allow us to see the patients, allow us to develop that confidence. When we went on doing our fellowship days, the first thing is that we were dealing with a lot of patients, and we were always into it that we need to do more, learn more and more to decide to make the factors. But at the completion of a fellowship, that is during the last 3 or 4 days at 3 or 4 months at Arvind, what we really learned is what not to do with the patients. What not to do, which surgeries you have to say no. The final decision is what not to do. So that is what I'm going to talk about. My topic is performing A and B scan by residents. Starting with the A scan biometry. Currently, the optical biometry is the gold standard, and now we are moving on to the OCT-based biometers. But still, there are many centers in India, especially the government setups, or is more to add to the condition, the private medical college, they still rely on ultrasound biometry, the immersion type and the contact type. So in such situations, the A scan, the keratometry has to be done manually, and the common mistakes commits by the resident is taking the manual K readings. Even if they take them manually correctly, there is at times difficulty in entering them correctly into the biometer machine. So that is a difficult part, and that has to be taken care of. The second important point is that in cases of contact tonometry, like if we do an immersion tonometry, it's good, but if we do an contact tonometry, then there's always a chances of excessive corneal compression out of hesitancy, out of not knowing the procedure, and of course it changes the axial length and the final IOL power. So this is second important point which has to be kept in mind while the residents are doing it. The third is that they don't have a clear-cut idea about which IOL power has to be used in extremes of the axial length. Like when you talk about normal axial length, it's great, but when you talk about the myopes or hypermetropes, the formula changes. And this is also not there in minds of the residents. The wrong selection of A constant, that is the A constant which is imprinted on IOL, they generally put that they don't know what is the personalized A constant or what is the A constant which is readily available on ULIP. So these are the common mistakes which is done by residents while they are doing the A scan. So another point is that the residents in many centers, they are in a sort of hurry. 100 patients from the camp have come and they have to do biometry of all the patients. So they are in a sort of hurry, and hurry anywhere commits mistakes. The second thing is the different users. If two residents are on night duty, one takes comfortably the charge of doing the keratometry, while the second takes the charge of putting the readings and doing biometry. And there comes the biggest cause of error. Not considering the readings of the fellow eye, for example, different axial length, different K values, is another important point which have to be kept by residents in mind while performing the A scan biometry. And of course, it is for us that we are not analyzing the outcomes. So on the B scan, as madam talked about the choroidal melanomas, yes, it is very important, but the limits of the things can always be missed. The residents do not have a clear-cut idea about the pathology, how far the pathology extends, and they can miss on the extent, and hence the planning changes accordingly. The probe orientation may be long. The wrong measurement of the extent of the lesions I have just talked about. For example, in the cases of orbital cysticercosis, they might miss upon the few findings. So lack of knowledge also endangers the machine. This also has to be kept in mind. The probe itself is very expensive. So what I want to emphasize by today's talk is that in this world, we have to train our residents. We cannot produce a future generation of ophthalmologists or the second generation without that. But as Prakash Marathe sir has told in the morning, that they have to be done under supervision and not free-handedly. Thank you so much.
May I ask about the chairperson to enlighten on this topic with one comment?
No, it has rightly been pointed out that the residents have to know all these things, because that is very much essential. But as he rightly said, it has to be done under supervision, because most of the wrongs that has been described by him also, whoever does this, commits the same mistakes. So it is for all, everybody who is doing that procedure has to do all these things, and the residents are no exception for that.
Is Dr. Vidya present there?
Thank you.
So Dr. Vidya is going to show us
The first side of the coin, that's performing perimetry by residents. So she's talking in favor of the same procedure.
Slides. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm here to talk about performing perimetry by the residents to do. So as we all know, the visual field testing is an important clinical testing we do for the glaucoma and the neurophthal conditions, mainly for the diagnosing the patients and also in monitoring the progression. So it's an elaborate test. It depends on various factors, the patient's cooperation, the comfort level, as well as the correct patient information and the setup. It can be done either manually or automated. The extent of untrustworthy results range from 3% to 29% according to various studies. Now here, 3 people are mainly involved in getting the good perimetric results: the doctor, the patient, and the examiner. I'm here to state that the examiner should be a resident to get the good reliable results. So the examiner has a unique role to have an impact on the perimetric results. First, in setting up the perimeter, he should accurately enter the patient's data, select the adequate refractive lens, make the patient comfortably seated, explain the patient how to perform this test, what is expected out of him, and why he have to do the test appropriately to get the reliable results. Then during the test, he should oversee the patient, identify the fatigability if it's happening, pause the test as and when required, change to a shorter duration despite the loss of accuracy in case the fatigability is too much. Soothing and encouraging words can reduce the anxiety, especially in the first time doers. That will increase the reliability of the test results. So why a resident here? The doctors are in a best position to convey the importance of perimetry. The doctor understands the importance of getting a reliable results. He will be able to pick up the right test. He will change the target size according to the need. He picks up the fatigability of the patient earlier and take the measures accordingly, knows when to modify the testing strategy, and he is more empathetic. And in special situations, he will be able to tackle it effectively, especially in cases like droopy eyelids or dermatochalasis, prominent facial features, very high refractive errors where the perimetries need to do with the contact lenses, not with the trial lenses. Then the small pupil size of less than 3 or more than 3 millimeter. And whenever there is an associated comorbidities of the patient, especially in cases of Parkinsonism and any other physical disability, he will be able to understand the patient better and do the effective measures so that the test can be performed very well. So he will try in all his ways to get the trustworthy results. So why not a technician here? He may not be understanding the importance of the test results. He may be having many patients for the same test. So he may just run the patient through the test. He may not be able to change the strategy or target size without consulting the doctor. He may not pick up the fatigability of the patient earlier. He may not have a conducive environment, especially as you see in this picture. This is our HFA room with 1 machine and 2 chairs. And this environment is not that conducive for the examiner to sit and counsel the patient to alleviate their anxiety. So I go through few case scenarios. Here you can see there's a 21-year-old patient with traumatic optic neuropathy in the left eye. The right eye field, first time when we did, it showed few scotomas here. And when we explained the patient, counseled him and repeated the test, it was very normal, which is what is expected out of him. Then in this patient, the first time the test reliability factors were very poor, and when we explained the patient, counseled him and then did, it was perfect. And then this 25-year-old with the rim defects you can see here. So when you choose the right batsman, he will get the cup for you. So I conclude by stating that residents are the better person to do a perimetry to get the reliable results. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidya. Very well said. Choosing the right batsman will get you the cup. So let's have a look over the other side of the other party batsman, what he has to say. Dr. Gopal Arora. May I request upon the other speakers, like the one person is standing on one podium, the other subsequent speaker can come and stand on the other podium. It will save time for all of us. So for the next session, Dr. Saeed Zishan. Yes.
A very good afternoon to one and all. Respect to the chairs and my dear friends. As I was hearing my friend Dr. Vidya, she herself mentioned there's a lot of load on doing a perimetry. And she mentioned technicians are overloaded. Just fit on those residents in spite of that technicians. Just imagine a resident doing 30 perimetry in a day where he's supposed to be called a clinician rather than a technician. Well, I say no. The average time taken for a static perimetry is 15 minutes. For a frequency doubling perimetry is 10 minutes, and of the Goldman standard would be about 20 minutes. No longer are the days when you find the fatigue, not only of the doctors, but also of the patient. If the patient is tired, you won't get the result that is expected from a patient. Similarly, resident doctors are no more the same fraternity that used to fit in. Now with the MCI inspection, the NABH criteria, believe me, for months together they have just to fill in the files and submit to the authorities without being called as an ophthalmologist themselves. What are the loads? Not only the OPD, the surgical, the thesis, presentation, poster research, believe me, these are not just optional things. There are professors sitting in front of me. These are compulsory for a residents nowadays. Publishing, paper presentation, they have to show before they move ahead of their MS ophthalmology. The undergraduate training, the camps. Believe me, I am not against allowing the residents to be taught perimetry. But I believe time to learn interpretation is more important than time to learn performing test. Well, we have the newer generation things coming up. They may be substituted for the perimetry, that's a different issue. But as you're mentioning in one of your slides, that we are not having sufficient number of ophthalmologists as compared to the number of patients. There comes the role of technicians because they have the availability of human resource to a great extent in India. That reduces the anxiety. If you wear a white coat, perform perimetry, patient is quite anxious. So the technician is doing it, the anxiety is gone. Resident can use the same time acquiring more and more surgical skill because they are basically clinicians. I give an example of a radiologist. Do you want the radiologist to know the megahertz or the physical property of the CT scan, or to interpret the CT scan results so that if he has a slightest of the doubt, he can order for the MRI and get the diagnosis done, which is more important for the patients? And believe me, stereoscopic disc evaluation still remains the gold standard for glaucoma. You have to evaluate the disc and the stuff what the clinician sees with the direct or the indirect or the whatever lenses, and there comes the clue of whether this patient is suspected of glaucoma. So the concerns are perimetry is a subjective test. First perimetry is questionable, and if that resident is made to do 3 perimetry, he would waste 1 hour in 1 patient. Repeatability, you have to. Reliability. Fixation loss, you don't need more than 20%, false positive less than 15%, negative less than 15%. Normative data begins at the age of 10. Suppose a 59-year-old patient has done a perimetry, and 1 year later, when he goes to 60 years, the data will be from 60 to 70. So this again would require a repeat perimetry, and we don't have the normative data there. Patient's cooperation, as already Madam mentioned, that goes against the doctors doing it. Then again, whether you want to do 30-2, 24-2, maybe you have to repeat the perimetry in succession. And again, the stimulus 3, if 2200 better, you might have to change the stimulus also at times. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Gopal Arora. Since I'm a glaucoma person, so I would like to go in the favor of residents performing the perimetry, but as in the morning, Dr. Meenakshi ma'am was covering in her topic and talk, that she said it's not important that all the residents or all the rubrics are going to be filled by one single person. It can be like one resident can be doing one thing, the other person can be doing the other thing. Similarly, one resident can be doing one for one patient perimetry, and the other person can be doing for the other patient also. Because we all know that the optometrist or the refractionist whom we are giving the responsibility of doing these fields or perimetry, they are not that well skilled that they are going to, because any perimetry starts with finding out about the foveal threshold or looking for the fixation losses. So fixation losses are coming whether because of the eye movement or for the blinking movement. Everything needs to be correctified and rectified at a very timely way, in a very timely manner. So if a doctor or a resident who is well skilled in seeing all these faults and fallacies, definitely the results are going to be better in a very serious note, and especially it saves the time of the doctor also sitting in the OPD instead of asking a repeat evaluation of the fields. So,
I think what we need to define is the must-know skills for a resident, and according to me, perimetry falls in the must-know zone. This is an essential skill. I know there are constraints of time, everything is there, but it falls amongst the essential skills. Practically, when 10 years down the line, once he is a practicing doctor, he should be a step above his technician. He should be knowing more about the machine than the technician himself, so that he is able to guide the technician rather than the other way around.
so again, coming to the next topic of presentations, that's performing retinal diagnostic, and we have Dr. Syed Zishan, who will talk about required.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So what are the various retinal diagnostics that the resident is usually exposed to? Is ophthalmoscopy, FFA, OCT, B-scan, and maybe ICG. So why do they need it? So obviously for diagnosing a retinal pathology, and when they are exposed to it early in their residency, so they will get they will know how to manage it, how to treat it, and when to treat these lesions, pathologies. So I just show some cases where, so a young male patient with left eye defective vision for about 2 days, the resident sees this kind of picture, and if he has an exposure to these things, he will definitely know what it is. So it's CSR. So similarly, in a diabetic patient, when he sees these kind of pictures, he should know the FFA, the interpretation of it, maybe exposed to it, and he sees these leaky mechanisms, and he should know how to treat it. Either go for a focal laser, don't go for a grid laser in these kind of cases, or an anti-VGF. Similarly, in diffuse CSME, because of leaking capillary bed, anti-VGFs are probably the right choice for these kind of patients. Sometimes, if he knows how to interpret the FFA, he'll be knowing with like major loss of vision in diabetic patients due to macular ischemia. He should know the very fine observations in this: irregular enlarged FAZ, widening of the intercapillary space, capillary budding at the edge of the FAZ margin, and should not go for indiscriminate use of lasers as fixation points in such cases always extrafoveal. Better to go with anti-VGFs. So sometimes he sees these kind of pictures and he comes to the diagnosis of diabetic retinopathy, but he does an FFA, so he'll see these telangiectatic vessels, so he knows it's Coats disease. Similarly, also OCT, FFA, they are very helpful in diagnosing ARMD and like different ARMDs. The masses above the RP line, they are much better responsive to anti-VGF and PDT. Like occult scene when slightly resistant. Similarly, a picture like this, you see red spots in the FFA, in the fundus picture, and then he does a FFA, you see a diffuse leak, and ICG, you see cluster polyps, he knows it's PCPV. So sometimes the patient comes for cataract surgery, nicely done, but the post-op vision is not that great. He is exposed to OCT and he knows there is a CNVM which is causing the visual loss. Similarly, a case again, cataract surgery, but he's not evaluated properly. In the left eye, the vision is not corresponding to the cataract, and that is where the clue is. You always do a retinal diagnostic OCT and just see how the other eye is, whether there is diabetic macular edema or not. And similarly, in occlusion cases, do FFA, see the extent of the foveal pathology, and you can better tell the patient about the prognosis of the condition. Similarly, after he should be able to see whether able to quantify the macular edema as well in these kind of cases. So in conclusion, in today's times, the patient have become more demanding. They have great expectations, and OCT is now usually considered a safer routine test in patients undergoing cataract surgery with premium lenses. So an early exposure to all these devices will be much better for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Syed Zishan. Now I request Dr. Anand Saxena.
I agree with Dr. Zishan in so many points. And in next few minutes, I will speak on the how we can avoid the some instrumental retinal diagnostic procedures on the basics of the clinical evidence and their statistical logic of the total scenario. So there are so many equipments are available now in the market, a wide range of for the retinal imaging systems. OCT, angiography, color photo, B-scan, so many things are there, as Dr. Zishan told. In fact, if you look, the incidence of retinal diseases are 7 to 8 approximately %, and incidence of macular diseases are 8% of among them. The availability of and reliability of these available equipments are very much variable. In a B-town city of India, we can say 70% of ophthalmologists have OCT, fundus camera, etc., ranging from basic models to very advanced model also. And how reliable are the machines and their quality of images is still doubtful. Among these ophthalmologists, only 10% have authentical vitreoretinal tanning. It's a rough calculation. So the results are not interpreted properly by them, and it should always be correlated clinically. Suppose in pre-op OCT for cataract surgery is needed or not, it should depends on the some clinical criteria basis like disproportionate loss of vision, poor near vision, distorted near vision, any clinically visible macular appearance in such conditions where no need of any diagnostic procedure, one should avoid it. In any instrumental retinal diagnostics, an essential part of retinal evaluation is the OCT, angiography and B-scan, and we should apply them only if they are clinically evident. Suppose fundus fluorescent angiography may not be required in central vein thrombosis. When you see all the 360 degree, there is a retinal hemorrhages. In central retinal artery occlusion, there is no need of angiography. Advanced proliferative diabetic retinopathy with TRD, there is no use of angiography. Severe vitreous hemorrhage, poor media of fundus. So we can avoid angiography in all such kind of cases. Sometimes injudicious use of B-scan do occur, like if media is clear, better to see clinically, evaluate the fundus with indirect ophthalmoscope, like in case of cataract, vitreous hemorrhage, retinal detachment. We can't always say that retinal investigations are essential from legal point of view. A good relevant fundus drawing can also serve the same purpose. And to conclude, retinal examination is not as synonymous to retinal diagnostics. Avoid unnecessary diagnostic procedures. Be clinically strong first. Unnecessary investigations gives wrong message to the society. It's a very important thing, and it adds unnecessary financial burden to the patient also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anand Saxena. It was very nicely concluded that always the injudicious use of any technology should always be avoided. And now may I call upon Dr. Harshal Rathi to take over the dais. Is Dr. Harshal Rathi around? No. So again, Dr. Sirish Nalvigation. So we are not having the other two speakers for the session today. So I would like the chairperson to conclude the session. I
Any
hope.
experts' comments
Yeah.
are most welcome.
There were two debates. One was on the A scan, B scan, and the second was on the perimetry. The entire point was not whether residents should be trained how to do perimetry. The discussion was, my point was, there should be emphasis more on the interpreting the results rather than knowing the perimetry in per se. Of course, they should be given a feel of how the perimetry is done, but more than that, interpretation which most of us do not know being a general ophthalmologist, which is more important for the residents.
So that is what we try to convey, that if the resident is performing the perimetry, as you said, or sonography, definitely for any skill, the interpretation only comes when you know the source of error. So that would be bottom line of any skill acquisition. If you know that, okay, if you're doing a OCT or performing a perimetry and this kind of fixation losses have come, if you know how to rectify it there, then at the time of performing it, definitely it is going to save the time of the person who is sitting in the busy OPD and taking care of the patients. Also, again, I would like to say one more thing, that all the residents should be trained in a particular step-up way. Like one day or probably 1 week or 1 month, they can be trained with that particular skill under observation. Then they should be doing it independently, and then probably they might be teaching to their juniors also as well. So that will help them to learn a lot. Any other comments from audience or?
I think this all highlights the lack of a well-defined curriculum in our teaching. All the topics that have been covered, we need to define what is an essential skill set for the residents, what is must know and what is need to know. Clinical skills, basic equipment, we need to tell the residents this is what you need to know when you get out of your training, and this is what is you might know. It is not an essential skill set. I think what we need to set up is a definite curriculum, and all these debates will be resolved.
So I hope we all have enjoyed the session, and thank you to all the speakers and the chairperson. And I would like to hand over the dais to the person, the convener for the next session. That's Dr. Rohit Saxena.